how do you deal with this issue of promises and so on? They are non-violent. This is the thing about non-violence, that we are not saying, when we talk about non-violence, we're not saying that you have to be peaceful and that, you know, if other people do things, we must just ignore them. We have to take up the challenges. We can't accept injustice. We can't accept evil, because you have to fight evil. If you take Gandhiji's example, when he came here, he was thrown out of the train in Pietermaritzburg. And because he was not a white person, and a white person who got onto the train objected to sharing the compartment with a non-white person. So he was thrown out. As he sat on the platform in Pietermaritzburg, he had three options. One was to pack his bag and go away back to India, and that he thought would have been a cowardly thing to do. The second was to stay in the country and accept the situation that this is how South Africa is, and I just have to live by the rules, accept what it's doing to me. And that would be condoning that evil of discrimination. And he said he can't do that. And the third was the option to stay here and fight that discrimination. And that's the option that he took on that day. He decided that I will stay here and I will fight this discrimination. So the point is that you have to confront those things. Promises that people have made that they don't keep, or promises that people make without giving due thought to what they are saying. We have to confront those people, and there are ways of bringing them to book, non-violent ways. And if we can't do it through communication, then we have to demonstrate, but non-violent demonstration and united demonstration, because that's the only way non-violent can succeed. If it's considered, number one, it must be well thought out, everybody must understand, there must be an agreement. If one person doesn't like the cafeteria food, he can't expect to change the cafeteria food when everyone else is enjoying it. It's only when he can convince everybody that, look, this food is bad, you shouldn't be enjoying it. When he can convince everyone, that's when he can achieve something.
Ella just asked me to look, I mean, the student perspective, there is an individual perspective, from a particular point of view. I'm a teacher there sitting there, you can tell a completely different story about the very same historical event, about what had happened and how the institution responded to that particular, but I don't think that's the purpose of this exercise. Simply to say sometimes stories are being told from a particular perspective because you have a particular issue that you want to raise. And so I'm sure the audience would want to accept the fact that the debate is much broader than just the university. There are mechanisms in a democratic society, as I think my colleague had said so eloquently, that should be exercised. And we have a democratic constitution. Why do you want to burn down a building? It just is unacceptable and it will not be allowed, period. That is a kind of violence that we will just not accept at this institution, and we simply should not accept that happening outside of this institution in the country as a whole. It's just simply an issue that we must just resist as well, because it's an option of cowards, as far as I'm concerned. The next thing is, how do you exercise the democratic institutions, mechanisms for basically campaigning and mobilizing for your demands? And there are a whole raft of things, and I think ElaGhandi had pointed out some of those things that can be tools that you can use. There's a common misperception that the philosophy of Gandhi is passive resistance means you just basically fold your arms and you turn the other cheek. That is a distortion of it. It is a tool for, I mean, that's how India got emancipated in 1947. Because they mobilized, it was militant, it was active, but it did not step across that dividing line. And besides, in a democratic society, why do you want to resort to violence? You have a democratic order within which you can resolve your problems. Why you resort to the gun to do so as well? The sharp example is 1961. That was during the time of the struggle against the regime. Now we have a democratic dispensation. So the historical analogy doesn't compare to today. We're in a different country, a democratic, you have all the rights, labor legislation, student parliaments you have here on campus and so on. And you will hear a lot of voices being said with different opinions. But as long as it plays the rules of engagement within the democratic dispensation, I have no difficulties how militant students are, so long as they don't cross, they don't violate the rights of others in the exercise of that. That's where my responsibility would come in, and I would certainly defend the institution and other students also against violence being perpetrated. And I'm sure my colleague is quite right. I'm not suggesting my colleagues are proposing violent means here. I hope not, because that would be a course that would be obviously self-destructive. But the argument that I simply want to say that I think it's a lazy and a cowardice point to say that we haven't succeeded with one or two tactics, therefore I must now resort to something that is completely beyond the pale. The whole raft of possibilities. In fact, the students won that particular campaign that my colleague is not very honest in pointing out. The university actually came down, compromised, it actually started subsidizing the food, it forced the company to lower the prices, it's actually looking at improving the residences and a whole series of things. But that's because the students mobilized. And so all I'm suggesting, they have the power in their hands. The second thing I just wanted to say, there is this notion of entitlement in our country. The idea that society owes us. You know, that we are owed by, nobody owes any of us. We have to basically struggle to get these things. And sometimes it's not Mandela, or Thabo Mbeki, or Jacob Zuma. However bright he is and clever he is, that's going to deliver those things to us. We have to make our futures. And part of the philosophy of Sibantu Biko, as I'm sure my friend Moki Trekasani would point out, is about also us taking the destiny into our own hands and not simply having the sense of expectation that the government, the state, the authorities, you must do it for us and we'll just sit back as well. That's a defeatist, that's not a revolutionary project as far as I'm concerned. A revolutionary project is when you seize control over your own destiny. You hold authorities accountable, certainly, but you're not going to surely wait until Zuma eventually delivers free houses for all. You're going to have to start self-help projects, community projects. Civil society has to mobilize, in addition to the private sector and so on. The problems of this country, the contradictions of inequality are too great for us to only pin our hopes on the great man view of history. That for me, that's not the project that I fought for as well. It's the empowerment of those individual colleagues there, that they can do much better than my generation had done. We delivered the fruits of political democracy, but we failed the fruits of economic democracy. But they have a better chance than us, using tools within the democratic dispensation, non-violent, robust tools, to advance the cause of democracy as well. So I'm completely clear in my mind that you do not need to resort to extra constitutional means to propagate historical change in this country. There are vast avenues available for us to use, and this university is one place where we will guarantee the freedom, the right of those colleagues, including the right to speak here, mind you, without suppression, to make sure that they exercise their rights fully, short of being violent. That's the only rule that's non-negotiable. Thank you.
In 1994, we all went to the polls and we elected the government. Whatever party won and which party you voted for, the fact is that all of us voted. we went to the elections and we've got the government that we wanted, the majority of the people wanted. Today, when we want to take up issues, we take it up using non-violent means and using different strategies than the strategies that we used during the apartheid government, because that government wasn't voted by us. We were fighting for our, for the right to vote, and we got that right to vote. So today, when we have grievances, we have to find different strategies. And what I'm saying is that non-violent strategies have a far better outcome at the end of it. They are far more, they are long-lasting. They're not strategies that are, that destroy things, but it's a strategy that builds. It builds your relationship with the other person. It helps you to attain what you wanted. And in every way, a non-violent strategy is a much better strategy than a violent strategy, because violence is a spiral. You carry on and it continues. It doesn't end. It carries on round and round. And so you never win with a violent strategy. Whereas with a non-violent strategy, it's a lasting strategy. That's number one. About the respect, I think that it's very important for us to build that respect. Respect for our children. We need to respect our children, and they would respond with respect for us. So we need to instill that kind of ethos. And somewhere along the line, we have to bring that in. We know that there is a lot of neglect, that people, and somebody talked about the difference between rural areas and the urban areas, that people who went to Model C schools are not reacting violently, whereas the people who were frustrated in the rural areas because of denial, because of deprivation, they are reacting violently. Well, we have to try and bring in some mechanisms to correct that. How we do it can only be discussed in a forum, that you have to set up to deal with that particular issue. There's no one solution. This is what I'm saying. Schools is one of the ways. We do have life orientation in schools, and maybe we have to relook at that syllabus. But there are other things as well that we need to do, and all those things can happen if we sit and discuss it, as we did in Durban, where we talked about nonviolence, and the students themselves came up with solutions. And many of those students who were saying that, look, violence is the only way, because it's a quick solution, and it's the only solution that we know about that can achieve good results and so on. Students said that, but then afterwards, when we discussed the pros and cons of non-violence, they were convinced that non-violence is better. So through discussion, we change people's perspectives. I think there was a third question.
The lady at the back, she was...
Yeah,
it's covered.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ila. I'm aware that there's an item on the agenda, thank you very much, colleagues, of an offer to present a gift to Ila from CANRAD side. Yes, please.
The question about raising the new generations of Gandhis, I think it was a very important question. And I challenge each one of you as students here, and also us as adults. Remember this idea of personal and collective responsibility. You've got to look at yourself as a person. What do I want to do to to really fit in this mission of this great nation so that it becomes a nation that we all can live together regardless of color. So we cannot point fingers outside, we need to start with us. I think it's